Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, for the minister opposite to frame this as a premier taking action is actually pathetic and it's laughable. It is not borne out by the facts. The fact of the matter is this: the premier has his fingerprints all over this scandal at Atira in BC Housing. And let's just refresh everyone's memories here. It starts with a BDO report being buried by this premier back in 2020, after he became the minister responsible for housing. The public only found out about it because it was leaked by a whistleblower. Then the E&Y review of BC Housing is posted on the government's website over the Canada Day long weekend. Then the Premier fires the entire board in June of 2022 and looks in the camera and tells British Columbians, don't worry about anything. There was no wrongdoing whatsoever here. In fact, the Premier goes so far as to direct BC Housing, when he was the minister responsible for housing, to actually have BC Housing issue a news release telling British Columbians that all is fine at BC Housing. Then the Premier leaves Cabinet for his leadership campaign in July of 2022, still with the BDO report being sat on. He then tells, when he comes back to the Executive Council as Premier, he tells CKNW, tells British Columbians through CKNW, that he knows nothing about this report, only to change his tune the very next day where he says, and I quote, "I didn't recognize the report that the reporter was describing to me, but I am familiar with that report now." Oh, how convenient is that? Then he announces that he has secretly launched a second E&Y investigation, this time a forensic audit, but sits on that for 2 months. Throughout this entire period, this Premier increases funding at Atira.
Members.
This Premier increases funding at Atira to $90 million, over 300%. That's under this Premier. But Mr. Speaker, then the Premier says, then we find out that all funding has been suspended at Atira, only to then learn, this is back in March of this year, we're told all funding is suspended to Atira.
Member will ask question.
And now we're told that actually there are still projects that are being funded for Atira. Mr. Speaker, this is an absolute and complete mess, and it's characteristic of how this Premier does business: evasion, blame, finger-pointing, and deception. The question is this: how is it that nobody, not least of which the Premier, how is it that nobody has stood up and been accountable for the consequences of this scandal, which has happened under the Premier's law?
Let's hear the answer, please. No interruptions.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. The Premier saw something inappropriate and he took action, Honourable Speaker. He didn't rip pages out of an ICBC report. No. When he saw something inappropriate, he saw changes needed, he did it, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, he didn't triple delete. He didn't triple delete emails. He didn't triple delete text messages, Honourable Speaker. He didn't do that, Honourable Speaker. Everything the Premier has touched, he has made sure that there's full transparency. ICBC, BC Lottery Corporation, the changes around money laundering, Honourable Speaker. What we saw was something inappropriate. We took action, Honourable Speaker. We made the report public.
Members.
We made the report public for the first time using Freedom of Information Act, unredacted to the public, Honourable Speaker. That's the level of transparency that we do on this side of the House.